In the shadow of the Galilean hills, where the dust of the earth mingled with the sweat of labor, lived a woman named Miriam.
She was a weaver in the small village of Bethsaida, a place where fishermen cast their nets into the Sea of Galilee, and the air carried the scent of fish and olive groves. Miriam's hands were callous from years of working the loom, her fingers nimble as they wove threads into cloth that clothed the villagers, and, on rare occasions, the wealthy merchants passing through. She was neither rich nor poor, neither young nor old, but her heart carried a weight heavier than the stones that anchored the fishing boats. Miriam's life had not always been tethered to the loom.
As a girl, she had dreamed of a different path, perhaps as a scribe's wife, learning the sacred texts, or a mother to a house full of children. But life had unraveled those dreams.
Her husband, Elihu, a carpenter, had died in a sudden fever 5 years prior, leaving her childless and alone. The village whispered that her barrenness was a curse, a mark of God's disfavor. Miriam bore their words in silence, her only solace found in the rhythmic clack of her loom, where each thread seemed to stitch together the fragments of her broken hopes. It was the 30 ad. And whispers of a new teacher, a man named Jesus from Nazareth,
had begun to ripple through Bethsaida. Fishermen spoke of him while mending their nets, and women shared stories at the well, their voices hushed with awe. They said he healed the sick, cast out demons, and spoke of a kingdom not of this world. Miriam listened but kept her distance. Her faith in God had frayed like an old garment. Why would a God who had taken her husband and denied her children care about her now? Yet the stories clung to her like burrs on a cloak,
impossible to shake off. One morning, as the sun rose over the lake, painting the water gold, Miriam sat at her loom, weaving a cloak for a local merchant.
Her fingers moved mechanically, but her mind wandered. She had heard that Jesus was teaching near the shore that day, and the village was abuzz with anticipation.
"He speaks as no one else does," said her neighbor, Rachel, who had seen him the week before.
His words, they pierced the heart. Miriam shrugged, muttering something about needing to finish her work. But as the day wore on, the clack of the loom grew monotonous, and her curiosity gnawed her.
"Hey, if this story's already pulling you in, hit that like button to let me know you're loving it. And drop a plus in the comments if you want a sequel about Miriam's life 5 years later."
Let's keep going. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and walked to the shore, where a crowd had already gathered. Men, women, and children pressed close, their faces lit with expectation. At the center stood Jesus, his voice steady yet warm, like a fire that both comforted and consumed.
He was not what Miriam had expected, not a towering figure or a stern prophet, but a man whose eyes seemed to see into the souls of those around him.
He was teaching about a kingdom where the poor were Miriam blessed, stood at
where
the edge
meek
of the
would
crowd,
inherit the earth,
her arms
and where
crossed,
love
her
was
heart
greater than
guarded.
sacrifice.
His words were beautiful, but they felt distant, like a song meant for someone else. Then, as if drawn by an unseen thread, Jesus' gaze met hers. For a moment, the world seemed to still. The chatter of the crowd, the lapping of the waves, the rustle of the wind all faded.
"You who are weary," he said, his voice carrying across the shore, "come to me, and I will give you rest." The words struck Miriam like a weaver's shuttle, piercing the fabric of her defenses. If those words hit you as hard as they hit Miriam, subscribe now. I drop a new story like this every Thursday, and you won't want to miss them. Oh, and in the comments, tell me which of Jesus' words resonates with you most. I'll read every single one. She turned and fled, her heart pounding, unsure why tears stuck her eyes. Back at her loom, Miriam tried to lose herself in her work, but the threads seemed to tangle more than usual.
She couldn't shake the memory of his eyes, the way they seemed to know her pain, her loneliness, her doubt.
For days, she wrestled with the encounter.
She told herself it was nothing, a fleeting moment, a trick of her tired mind.
But the stories of Jesus kept coming. A blind man in Capernaum could now see.
A lame woman in Magdala walked again.
The fishermen Simon, Andrew, James, and John had left their nets to follow him.
Miriam's skepticism began to fray. Thread by thread, one evening, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across her small home, a stranger knocked at her door.
It was a young woman named Lydia, a servant from a wealthy household in Tiberias.
Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. "Please," she said, "I need a cloak, a good one, quickly. My mistress is ill, and we must travel to find the teacher from Nazareth. They say he can heal her." Miriam's hands stilled on the loom. "Why do you believe this man can help?"
she asked, her voice sharp.
Lydia's response was simple. "Because those who seek him find hope. Imagine you're Miriam right now. What would you ask Jesus if you had one question?
Drop it in the comments below, and I'll reply to the most thought-provoking ones in my next video. Miriam worked through the night, weaving a cloak finer than any she had made before. Each thread felt like a prayer she didn't know how to speak, a plea for something she couldn't name.
When she handed the cloak to Lydia at dawn, the young woman pressed a coin into her hand more than the cloak was worth. "Come with us," Lydia urged.
"See for yourself." Miriam hesitated, her fingers clutching the coin.
She wanted to refuse, to stay in the safety of her loom.
But something within her stirred a thread of longing she had long buried. The journey to Capernaum, where Jesus was said to be, was not long, but it felt like a pilgrimage. Miriam walked with Lydia and her mistress, a frail woman named Hannah, whose illness had left her weak and gaunt.
The road was crowded with others seeking Jesus, beggars, farmers, even a Roman soldier who kept his distance, but watched with keen interest.
When they reached Capernaum, the crowd was thicker than ever, spilling out from a house where Jesus was teaching.
Miriam stood on her toes, straining to see over the heads of those in front.
She caught glimpses of him, his hands gesturing as he spoke, his face alight with compassion. Hannah, too weak to push through the crowd, began to weep.
Lydia looked at Miriam, her eyes pleading. "Help us," she whispered.
Miriam, who had always kept to herself, felt an unfamiliar resolve. She took Hannah's arm, supporting her weight, and began to call out, "Teacher,
have mercy." Her voice, usually quiet, rang out with a strength she didn't know she had.
The crowd parted slightly, and Jesus turned. His eyes found Hannah, then Miriam, and once again, she felt that piercing gaze, as if he saw not just her face, but her very soul.
If this moment gives you chills, drop a heart emoji in the comments. "Oh no, I am not the only one feeling it." He approached, and the crowd grew silent. "Daughter," he said to Hannah, his voice gentle, "your faith has made you well." He touched her hand, and color returned to her cheeks.
She stood straighter, her eyes wide with wonder.
The crowd gasped, some praising God, others murmuring in disbelief. But Jesus' gaze lingered on Miriam.
"And you," he said softly, "what do you seek?" Miriam's throat tightened. She wanted to say she sought nothing, that she was here only for Hannah, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she whispered, "I want to believe." Jesus smiled, a smile that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds.
"Blessed are those who seek," he said.
"The kingdom is woven in the threads of your heart. If this story's touching you,
hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. It takes me 15-20 hours to craft these stories, and your support keeps me going.
Also, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. Let's build a map of our community."
The days that followed were a blur.
Hannah, now healed, returned to Tiberias, but Miriam stayed in Capernaum, lingering near the places where Jesus taught. She listened to his parables of seeds and soils, of lost sheep and hidden treasures, and each one felt like a thread being woven into a new tapestry of her life.
She began to see her loom not as a burden, but as a gift, a way to create beauty in a broken world. She wove cloaks for the poor, giving them freely, and her home became a place where others gathered to share stories of the teacher. One evening, as she sat at her loom, a young boy from the village ran to her door.
"Miriam, come quickly,"
he cried.
"The teacher is leaving for Jerusalem, but he's passing through Bethsaida one last time."
Miriam dropped her shuttle and ran to the shore, where a small crowd had gathered to bid Jesus farewell.
He stood by a boat, his disciples nearby, their faces a mix of joy and sorrow. Miriam approached, clutching a small piece of cloth. She had woven a simple square, dyed blue like the Sea of Galilee, with a single golden thread running through it.
"If you want me to turn this story into a short film, we need 5,000 likes on this video. Seriously, 5,000. And I'll grab a camera and head to Israel to shoot it. Make the film in the comments if you're in."
"Teacher," she said, her voice trembling, "this is for you." She held out the cloth, feeling foolish.
It was nothing compared to the gifts others had brought: fish, bread, even coins.
But Jesus took it, his fingers brushing hers, and he smiled.
"This thread," he said, tracing the golden line, "is your faith. Small but strong. Keep weaving, Miriam, for the kingdom is made of such threads." As Jesus and his disciples sailed away, Miriam stood on the shore, the wind tugging at her shawl. For the first time in years, she felt whole, not because her life had changed, but because her heart had.
She returned to her loom, and as her fingers moved,
she hummed a song she had heard Jesus' followers sing, a song of a God who sees the weary and calls them his own. Years later, when news reached Bethsaida of Jesus' death and the strange,
wondrous stories of his resurrection, Miriam was not surprised.
she had felt his presence in every thread she wove, every act of kindness she shared.
Her loom became a place of prayer, her cloth a testimony to the one who had rewoven her life.
And in the quiet moments, when the village slept and the stars shone over the Sea of Galilee,
Miriam would touch the golden thread in her own cloak and whisper,
"Blessed are those who seek, if you made it this far." You're a legend. Drop the word thread in the comments, so I know you stuck with me to the end.
And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell. Next week's story is even bigger. See you in the comments.